From the dawn of time we came, moving silently among you, down through the centuries, immortals. So this is M.A. Moreno bringing you another Cine-cool review. In this particular video we are covering the Dimension films Highlander 3 and Highlander 4, known in America as Highlander the Final Dimension and Highlander Endgame. This review is brought to you by Pringles Reduced Fat. Eat up, fatty, it's kinda good for you this time. While the TV series was still early in its run, someone decided, you know what, there might still be life in the film series as well. So what if we made a sequel to the first film that didn't follow Highlander 2? Oh, you mean like the TV series? Will it be set with the TV series? No, we can't trust the TV series will be a hit. Let's make this a standalone sequel to the first film. Highlander 3 promoted itself as the apology. It was meant to make up for all of the horrible things that the fans had gone through, you know, with Highlander 2 being so weird and Highlander series essentially ignoring the motivation from the first film. But you know what? If this is their idea of an apology, I'll just accept the initial abuse. It even messes with the ending of the first film just so it can exist, because once again, if you have a definitive ending, you have to like pull people out of a magical cave or something, which is exactly what this film did. It just happens that they pulled out an overacting Mario Van Peebles who's trying his best to be like Clancy Brown's Kurgan. The director, Andy Morahan, much like Russell Mulcahy, came out of the music video scene, although his style is more distinctly 90s. The problem is that he decided that instead of making a sequel, he was far more interested in just doing an updated remake. So the film is almost beat for beat the original film. It goes beyond formula and just becomes a rehash. This might have worked better if he would have been able to work out that deal with Guns N' Roses, but sadly the producers would have none of that. So instead we're stuck with slightly altered rip-offs of, say, Dr. Feelgood that's worked into the soundtrack. You're like, oh wait a minute, is this Motley Crue? Oh no. No, they changed a few notes, and so now Motley Crue can't sue. Other than Lambert, there's not really much nice that can be said about the actors in this film. Peoples is especially terrible, but that's not to say that Deborah Unger is that great as the love interest who finds out about Connor's past and starts following him. It leads to an excessively long sex scene, which makes everyone in the room feel uncomfortable. It's something that feels like it wandered out of the Playboy channel. Of course, those in the theaters were spared that because this was released with a PG-13. I'm going to have to give it 1 star. Frankly, I don't know why you would watch this. The only good thing about it is that Bonnie Portmore montage that appears in the middle of the film, and you know what? You get that in the episode Homeland too. If you must hunt this film down, the only watchable version I've seen is this one sent to me by this Greek guy. He called it the unofficial Renegade version. Now, of course, this means you'd have to buy a copy of the normal DVD. When Dimension initially began work on Highlander 4, it sounded like this was going to be an attempt to give us a real apology, not just a remake. Gregory Whiting was brought back to write the script. Sean Connery was in talks to come back. But, of course, it goes without saying that someone had screwed up along the way, and instead we got Highlander Endgame. A movie by a guy who had never directed anything before. You can tell it looks like an episode of the TV show. It has the novelty of being the Star Trek Generations of the series, as Christophe Lambert's Connor McLeod passes the torch to Adrian Paul from the TV show. If you were wanting a true team-up movie, you're not going to get it here. It's just throw back in the first episode of the TV series, because this is going to be a depresso fest. Lambert is too dour, and Adrian Paul is just seemingly out of his element. Jacob Kell, terrible villain. It is indeed painful to watch him chewing through the scenery like no Kurgan has chewed before. His posse, what a total waste of what could have been an interesting cast. This is especially true of Donnie Yen's character Jin Kei, who was obviously written to be a better character than he turned out to be. Although he does lend some decent martial arts to the film, which varies up the action a bit. Lisa Barbucha is Kate/Faith, the ex-wife of Duncan, is obviously only there for the same reason that Deborah Unger was in the last film, you know, to show off her goods. Although this one goes really in the vein that has a sex scene interspersed with a flashback sex scene just to spice things up. It's certainly out of character for him to have an ex-wife, considering that he was firmly established to be a single man throughout his whole life in the TV show. The film was originally set in 2000 with a flashback to 1990. Connor was in the sanctuary for a decade. And, oh dear, that's really going to mess things up, isn't it? Now we can't include the first episode of the TV series, which came out in 1992. In the DVD release, they moved the dates up to 1992, and for the main film, 2002. I would have shifted the years from, 10 to 5, which would just be changing one piece of dialogue, and I would set the film in 1994 and 1999. Allow people to watch Highlander 3 as a part of the TV show timeline if they wanted to, and it would fit together with the continuity of the series anyways, because the 1990 flashback was set in Paris, and Duncan was in Paris in 1994, December. If this had been a season-long arc, sort of like the Callis arc, or if this had been a Connor-only movie or a Duncan-only movie, it might have been fine. But since it's a crossover passing the torch film, it's just utterly disappointing. So that's the mess that is the Dimension films. And while you get buzzed about that, I'll leave you by putting the cool in Cine-cool.
Waste of time. I don't understand why they spent the money on those movies when perhaps they could have been, feeding children somehow.